The following podcast is intended for mature audiences. If you enjoy our work, please like, comment, subscribe, and follow the links in the description. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Greetings and salutations, listener. It is I, Eric J. Chucky, joined, as always, by the boy.
Hey.
This is a Two Nerds podcast, and you know what? We got such a good reaction on last week's video, we decided, let's do the trifecta.
Yeah, a couple more versions of this have been floating around, one for video games and one for television. And so we decided to go ahead and set up and do both video games and TV. We're going to be doing one and the other in two separate podcasts, I believe is the plan, yes?
Yes, that is the plan. So this week you got to learn some video game stuff about us. In case you missed last podcast, go back and watch it. But I'll give you the rundown here real quick. This is basically 5 video games that you could play to get an idea of our taste in video games and also of us as people. And then we're also doing them for each other, blind, to see, I don't know, it's part of the fun, and it rounds us out to a nice half hour.
Alright, so last time we started with me, so why don't this time we start with you do, I forget what order we did.
I believe I do my actual top 5, right?
I know, you do me.
I do you.
Then you do...
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
You do the top 5 you made for me, then the top 5 you made for you, and then I do the same thing. So, the top 5 I made for you.
I think we went back and forth.
Whatever. Go.
You're
do
right.
one. Do one now!
I'm retitling this podcast. This is the We Bicker About How to Make a Podcast. 5 games that I think you could play to get an idea of The Boy. These are in no particular order and may change tomorrow. I picked Civilization.
Okay.
A little ironic, perhaps, because I tend to play more than you do, but it informs someone that you love history. Actual world history.
That's true.
It's not quite an RTS, you know? It's, what do they call it, 3X or something? EX? 4X?
4X.
3X is that movie with Vin Diesel. Guardians of the Galaxy.
It's a turn-based strategy game.
I'm filling the podcast with extra good commentary.
No.
Okay. But it's not the traditional strategy game, but it's you do like strategy games like that. It's a very specific kind of strategy game you have taste for that isn't present in a lot of other, especially modern strategy games. So, you good at it? I don't know. We played it a bunch. We have fun.
Thanks.
I also have...
I'm not good at it for future reference.
He's good at it against me, and I am bad at it, so...
I'm bad at Civ. Look, cause let's
Yeah,
I don't want to mince words.
No, we're not, like, pro Civ players. You can't watch us on the pro Civ scene. Can you imagine, like, an actual pro Civ, like, tournament watching?
God, no.
It'd be like fucking Burning Man. You'd have to go out to a LAN party that feels like a desert for an entire week watching a motherfucker play Civ.
No. No.
So I also chose Batman Arkham City.
Oh, you know, that's spoilers. That's not on any of my lists. That's not on my list at all, and that's a really good pull.
When I was going through my list, I finished it and then was sitting and going, man, I really wish I had a thing for X. And I was like, oh, what about this really obvious fucking thing? So I feel you. Like, I was so spoiled for choice with the video game.
No, because I really love that genre of game also.
And while, you know...
Not just Batman, but like the Assassin's Creed style rhythm fighter. Mm-hmm. I actually really enjoy that, and stealth games of that specific stripe. Like, I'm upset that's not on my list. That's a really good pull.
Thank you. I figured it was better than, obviously, Arkham Knight and the original Arkham Asylum. Or any of the Assassin's Creeds, yeah. Perhaps in a similar theme there, I also grabbed Rise of the Tomb Raider. Although that feels a little different to me. That's a bit of a different game.
Yeah.
But your enjoyment for that was about as strong. It's, you know... I gather that's kind of what Uncharted is?
Rise of the Tomb Raider specifically, not the Tomb Raider reboot, the sequel, is a lot closer to Uncharted, yes. It's very much a spectacle game.
Yeah, and as I recall, you liked that one a little better, although perhaps not in story.
Yeah, basically.
Gameplay is what I more care about here for a video game, but story is important too. Speaking of which, Path of Exile.
No, see, I don't... That's... Look, alright, look. He's not wrong, but I take exception to that anyway.
Micromanagement is something you excel at and enjoy. You find a lot of fun out of
arranging the pluses to make more pluses.
And I could have gone with Mass Effect on this one, the first one. That would have been an easy pull. But I don't think Mass Effect was as viscerally satisfying for you to see the fruits of your labor as Path of Exile. Because Path of Exile has that really steep difficulty curve after the main game that Mass Effect just never has.
Unless you play a harder version of the game. That's not really
what Or unless you don't fully understand what you're doing and have to fight Matriarch Benezia 73 fucking times.
He's dragging us both there.
And then the last game I had on here was Skyrim, which was maybe a really obvious pull, but quite the opposite of Path of Exile, but still one of those things where hard work pays off for you. And like I can't think of a game I've actually watched you play more.
That's because there isn't a game I've actually played more. Maybe
Super Hex.
I have played minimum 300 hours of that game. Yeah. More, I guarantee.
So, and I don't know, if y'all haven't played Skyrim, I would recommend it. A guy I know named Todd thinks it's pretty keen.
You can tell because he keeps releasing it. He's going to release a new version of Skyrim until everyone on Earth owns a copy.
And then he'll say, good, no more Elder Scrolls.
God, that's so true. All right.
All right, so what 5 games do you think are going to be on my list? Do you think would define me well?
This is kind of a scattershot because these are all games that I know you love.
Sure.
And I think they all really help highlight a different aspect of, like, if you're going to get to know White through the medium of video games, it's sort of inefficient, but I'll try and help.
It's difficult, too, and there's a reason, like, we could probably do music on this theoretically.
Oh, I would not
do well. But I would not want to on that one. It's so broad and so difficult to say, like, 5 albums or 5 songs or 5 artists. Good Lord.
No.
Video games was hard enough.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. All right, I'm going to add an additional disclaimer to the one he added. I don't think my lists are amazing, but I knew that if I tried any harder than I did, it would take me 5 hours.
Same.
So,
I would have had to do, like, research, and fuck that.
So, the list I have for you, these are not in any particular order. We'll start from I have them listed here this way. So, Dark Souls 3, because... boy howdy, if you know White, that is not only a game that he loves and thinks is excellent, it really helps you get an idea of the philosophy he tries to approach life with.
Yes.
And that's important if you want to know somebody.
I think Dark Souls 3 is a good choice because it really is, like... I would be hard-pressed to say it's a perfect game. It's got its staggering points, but...
Good, because if you did, I'd have to fight you, and that's not what this podcast is about.
But Dark Souls 3, in particular, the Dark Souls series is a genre of games I'm not that into. So for something to stand out as hard as Dark Souls 3 does, as being as good as it is at what it does...
Yeah, you're not super into, like, really hard timing, like, adventure games.
No,
like,
I don't play Devil May Cry. I don't play God of War.
Spectacle fighters and shit like that.
That's not really my bag, but... Like, Dark Souls
the
really
high skill cap game sort of genre is not what you do mostly.
Well, depends on the genre, but I feel like Dark Souls 3 is a good choice. And for a game for me in the year...
I mean, you like the gameplay, but I'm not recommending it for the gameplay, really. I'm recommending it for the atmosphere, for the tone, and for the philosophy.
Yes, and all that. But it's also very telling in the year of our Lord Cthulhu 2018 for me to have defeated the game 2.75 times now. When I haven't replayed a game like that in a long fucking time.
Not since, number 2 on my list, Final Fantasy VI. Because in the same way that Dark Souls 3 is a really good way of looking at, like, if you want to get to know my friend here, a good way of looking at his philosophy and what he likes in tone and that sort of thing. Final Fantasy VI is what he likes out of a story. Like,
yeah, that's a good way to put that.
If you're going to make a story that he will like, aim for that and you won't miss by much.
Cough, Age of Ultron, cough.
Number 3 I have is a game that I don't know much about. I'm going to be honest, it's on here because he wouldn't shut the fuck up about it for a minute.
I'm going to guess what that game is.
It's Dropsy.
I own a plush Dropsy, and Jay, I know you're not listening. Why would you? But thank you.
Number 4 is a game series is one that I kind of wanted on here because this game series as a whole is something that you like, and it's from a developer that you like, and of the two different sides of this developer's work, you have slightly more of a fun time with this than the other. So I went with Mass Effect 3. Because you really enjoyed the story, you really enjoyed the ending, which is not common. So I feel like that's a good way of getting insight is playing it, going all the way to the end, and realizing that, yes, White liked all that. So did I.
I even like a lot of the philosophies around, what the ending could really mean. Even if I have my preference, which is what happened in the game. But
yeah, it just you like a lot of that game, and you like BioWare games.
I do,
but you have more fun with the Mass Effect ones than the Dragon Age ones in general.
And that's a good point. I really love the Dragon Age series, but I don't think I could play 1 again.
No,
I don't want to play 2 again.
Why would you?
And I could start Inquisition again, but I don't know if I'd finish it.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever actually truly completed it. I mean, I've beat the game, but...
Yeah, no, I don't think you have. And then the last one I have is very different than the others. And these are all very different games. But I felt I would be remiss not to include something that shows how much, for you, video games are a creative process.
Very, very smart.
So WWE, I chose 2K18.
It's the most recent one as of this
recording.
recording.
It's the most recent one as of this recording, and that's why I picked it, literally. WWE games in general, not necessarily for the base game, it has issues. It's always a little wonky, but you always make such excellent use of the suite of creative tools that, for me, it's not just, it's not just play this game. It's, if you can, look at White's save file, and that'll tell you a lot about him as a person.
Sure.
Because for you, video games are, to a certain extent, a creative, very interactive endeavor.
I would agree with that entirely. I was very proud this year because, for those of you who don't play WWE games, they have you can share your created wrestlers online, and if you want to get a lot of people to download your stuff and get platinum rank, I think it's called, in how many creative slots you have to upload and stuff, you can make the new hotness. You can make the really popular guys in NJPW, or the really good attires for Roman Reigns, or the guys that were missing from the roster, like Hulk Hogan or better Matt Hardy or whatever. I don't do that. I make original characters mostly, and this past year I did some alternate attires for the Usos, and we followed them through the pay-per-views, and I think I ended up doing 3 different alternate attires before we stopped watching WWE. By the strength of that and a really damn good Billy Gunn alone, I managed to break platinum, and this was the first time I've done that. So I was kind of proud of that. So that's actually a really good choice.
All right. Well then, on that note, what is in your top 5 for you?
For me, I kind of went a different route. Let me go ahead and clear off 2 that are shared. Of course, Final Fantasy VI is on my list. It is my favorite game of all time. I don't think anything could ever unseat it. Not just storytelling, but I like JRPGs. The classic 90s definition of a JRPG.
You really do.
Turn-based combat. I like your little menus. I like the way exploration is handled. It really jives with me. And that's something that isn't captured quite the same, even with all the spectacle that I do love, but it's not quite the same in modern RPGs.
No, there's been very much an action RPG wave. There's not much in the way of true turn-based. Even turn-based ones, you get active time battle stuff.
Sure, but there's also like exploration is so different because the map is 3D. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I just feel like Final Fantasy VI epitomizes both that and options and consequences and side quests. It's just, and it's a really nice long game, and I love it. So yeah, of course it was going to be on my list. Dropsy is also on my list because...
Good, because you can explain it.
Yeah, I can explain it. I would have at the time if it hadn't been. It is a point-and-click adventure game about a perhaps terrifying-looking, but pleasant little clown man. One of your primary goals in the game is to hug everyone. And it's sweet. It talks about how... I mean, the basic theme of it is not everyone is what they seem. And sometimes you have to peel back those layers and understand that people are people and everyone is complex. And I believe that very deeply. And this game encapsulates it in something you can knock out in 5 hours. Beautiful visuals, phenomenal music to it, just excellent theming. A+ game, Dropsy. You are a fantastic little endeavor. But yes, both of those were on my list. I do love point-and-click adventure games as well. I've really been getting back into them since last couple of years, really. Otherwise on my list, I have Dark Souls, but it's Dark Souls 1.
Really?
Yes.
Because I know you like 3 better.
I do. I prefer 3 vastly. I think 1 is a much less tight game. I think it's got a lot more problems to it. But... the philosophy that you mentioned, the life philosophy and how I kind of approach things mentally is way more prevalent in Dark Souls 1.
Like way more textual.
Yeah, it's right there. It's something that if you think about it really hard, if you played Dark Souls 3 natively, without having played the other 2 games, you might come across that idea. If you play Dark Souls 1 and you're paying attention at all, it gets in there. You might not notice it until way later, but it gets in there. And it's not just me.
That's fair.
It is the only reason I come to this conclusion that it's just sort of a thing that Dark Souls does. And what a wonderful thing to do. I also really like the game, but I also think a person playing that game to understand me a little better and my tastes would get more out of the first one. Even though I think it's not quite as good of an experience.
I feel like the holes in the experience might present an obstacle.
I agree, but at the same time, I'm that person who says if you haven't played a Dark Souls game, do them in order. You maybe can skip 2 depending on the reason you're doing it, but do them in order.
I skipped 2.
I don't blame you. It's a very different game, but that's another conversation for another time. Also on my list, because you mentioned that I don't tend to like punishingly hard games. I do, if they're 2D platformers. And I wanted to pick something like maybe Super Time Force or They Bleed Pixels or Electronic Super Joy or something like that. But in the end,
you picked Mega Man?
Mega Man 3. 3 might not be my favorite. The more I age, the more I think 4 might be. But it has been for a long time. It was for a long time my favorite. And I think it's the easiest, most accessible version of Mega Man to get into. It's not too hard. I love the extra levels they do, where you revisit and you fight the Mega Man 2 bosses. I just think it's a really tight game. Still has a lot of really good challenges. I was stuck on Shadow Man stage forever when I played it again recently, so... last on my list might become somewhat of a surprise. Fallout 4.
Fallout 4? Really?
Fallout 4.
Alright, I'm interested.
So I made this choice because I really love Fallout 4. I don't think I do it enough service in how much I enjoyed playing that game. I never did finish the last DLC because I wanted to do it as a raider. Like my character to be a raider, because I very much get in character in my game. I'm not just, what's that thing they talk about in Skyrim, the guy who's the leader of the Fighters Guild, the Thieves Guild, the Assassins Guild, the Mages Guild. I don't do that shit. And my character is a good guy, so he wasn't going to be a raider. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to join raider gangs and be an asshole. But Fallout combines a lot of things I love about games that I was having a hard time picking between in one nice little package.
There's that creative element.
There is that creative element because you can fully customize all those towns to however you want. There's that pleasant, grindy element where you can go out and get all that gear and stuff. There's lots of NPCs to get into, and while their storylines and their personalities might not be as deep as, say a BioWare game, it's
or
fun.
even earlier, better Fallout games.
Sure. But it's the Fallout game where I can use my own skill at shooting things to shoot things.
He very much dislikes that there's a behind-the-scenes dice roll in previous games.
I don't mind it in Fallout 1 and 2, as little of them as I played.
Yeah, because they're not shooters.
Right. But in Fallout 3, if I point my gun at something and the reticle is on something and I pull the fucking trigger, it better hit the thing I'm pointing at. I've done the work. You don't get to roll a die and go, I'm sorry, friend, you don't hit. Fuck you. I will take a damage, debuff. That's fine, but let me hit, man.
He's very triggered by that.
I'm super fucking triggered by that. And I just, again, the choices, the dialogue choices, the characters you can play, the places you can explore, how much you can just go, you know what, fuck it, I'm going east today, and you'll run into something new for a long time. I bet I could pick up the game now and not even touch the last DLC and still find a bunch of shit I never fucked with before. So yeah, that's the little list I came up with. It combines all those wonderful elements of Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing and, BioWare games into a Skyrim package with guns that I can shoot with my own real shooter skills, of which I only possess on console. Unlike the rest of the universe.
So, I mean, look, it's fair. It's not on my list, spoilers, but I can understand your point. I'll do mine. We'll go bottom up, because the one I have at number 5 is kind of a departure from the rest, but I felt like it needed to be there. Because it's a genre of game I love, and I think this one is my favorite specific instance of my favorite franchise of a genre I like. And that's fighting games, subgenre Namco Fighters, subgenre Soul Calibur, specifically 4. Soul Calibur 4 is the best Soul Calibur game. At least for me.
I cooked up a little honorable mentions list, and I will touch on one or two when you're done, but fighting games in general, I think to know either of us, you have to have at least played a fighting game.
Injustice almost made it on your list. It got bumped for Dropsy.
And that's fair, man. Injustice is probably the fighting game I've jived the most with in a long fucking
Injustice
time.
2.
Since Soul Calibur 4, actually.
Soul Calibur 4 is probably my favorite fighting game, just because it is, one, I prefer Namco fighters to 2D fighters. I just always have. And 2, 4 is probably, at least for me, it is the best expression of what I want out of a Soul Calibur game. Mm-hmm. 5, they took some steps that I'm not fond of. I played 5 a lot less. I've played fighting games less as I've aged, but I do love them. And I think to get me as a person, if you were, again, trying to do it through the wildly inefficient medium of video games, playing a fighting game is important. Playing a Soul Calibur game is important, so play the best one.
Which, I mean, in a month's time, might change.
I hope so.
It looks dandy.
Number 4, I have as Skyrim, for all the reasons he listed.
Hey, I picked a good one. Go me.
For all of the many, many reasons he listed. Again, these aren't in any specific, order. Because I've played more of this than probably any other game ever. I wrang every drop of fun out of this game, and then I went and got all the mods I found even remotely enjoyable and drained all the fun out of them as well.
You mentioned these aren't in any specific order, and another thing to mention and remind ourselves of, because we mentioned at the top of the show, but let's say it again, these are not our favorite games necessarily. Yes, Final Fantasy VI is my favorite game. Yes, Dark Souls 3 is definitely my favorite.
I would have a hard time picking my favorite video game. This is the games that I think if you play or are aware of, you could, as I put it, if you got all these if you understood all of these video games, you played them or you knew what they were about, and then you used them to buy me a video game, you'd have a real good chance, a good honest shot of getting a game I like.
Right. Well, and to that extent, like, you know, you said Mass Effect 3, and yeah, Mass Effect 3 is one of my top 5. It's probably still number 2. I don't know, Dark Souls. But if I was telling somebody to play a Mass Effect game to get me, I would say probably play 2. For a number of reasons. And
for me, I would say I would tell them to play 3 because you need that ending.
Sure, the ending really helps, man, and I agree with that, but I feel like the overall mood of 2 it sells the point a little more, and it's less climactic. But at the same time, obviously, I wouldn't necessarily suggest playing a Mass Effect game, despite the fact that I love that series. So it's an important thing to remember as we continue.
Okay. The next one I have is Mass Effect 1. Because I do like micromanagement of the Mass Effect games, I still think it's the best.
Mass Effect 1 was almost on my list for you.
I love Mass Effect 2. I like Mass Effect 3 a lot. But at the end of the day, they don't have the bits I enjoy most of RPGs. Now, don't get me wrong, the story of 2 and 3 are amazing, but you need the whole package. And for me, 1 is the best.
I did, before I played 2 and 3, I sat down and watched somebody else play 1. So, I had that story. And I agree that it's very important to know.
The next one I have is Dragon Age Inquisition. Because I love BioWare games, and I like Mass Effect and Dragon Age for different reasons.
I agree with that.
For me, Mass Effect was much more about a cinematic experience, experiencing the story of this one person throughout like a whole sequence of events. Dragon Age is a much more personal thing for me. Not just because I feel like they did a better job, the Dragon Age team, of personalizing your universe, but because it just jives. The character creation in Inquisition is excellent. I've played a lot of that game, and if you may notice, there's a lot of role-playing games on here, and I think Inquisition does an excellent job of getting across exactly what I like in a role-playing game. There's a lot of deep characters to get involved with, there's a lot of fun to be had, and it does have the mechanical bits and bobs that I like to be able to mess with.
You know, continuing the dialogue here for a moment, if I may. Character creation engines being really good is another big part of Fallout 4 and Dragon Age Inquisition, like you mentioned. Not as bad in Inquisition, because I've played through parts of the games more, but I am never going to forget my buck-toothed Taylor Swift elf. And I can't play another male character in Fallout 4 because that face and that voice are forever linked, because that game's character creation engine is so fucking tight.
It is a really good character creation engine. The last one I have, however, is the better Fallout game, Fallout New Vegas.
See, I was thinking 2.
No, New Vegas.
New Vegas.
Because I love Fallout 1 and 2. I do. I love them. They're beautiful isometric games. They were a big part of my childhood. New Vegas carries that spirit forward into the Bethesda, thank you. It wouldn't come to my brain. Into the Bethesda model of combat, which I do find more enjoyable to play.
It is fun, even when I was frustrated with it for reasons I didn't understand until Fallout 4 came out. Like, as I've said before, you and I in conversation, when I was thinking about all my favorite moments in Fallout 3, I was thinking of things that happened in New Vegas.
Yeah, because Fallout 3 is a good game, but New Vegas is an excellent game. Its mechanics are great. They're a role-playing game still, which is my biggest beef with Fallout 4, is it's not a role-playing game anymore. It doesn't have RPG mechanics, and your choices for who your character is are also pretty dumbed down. Even, like, to the point of it being hard to get one specific character across because they make it so obtuse. So I love New Vegas because it does allow that specificity in who you're playing, and it gives you a lot of different options to make very wildly different choices throughout a bunch of different runs, and its mechanics they have the RPG element in that there is a D&D sort of, well, I think it's actually GURPS, It is actually, yeah. A GURPS base underneath everything, the framework. So you're not gonna always hit, and if you suck at guns, you're going to not miss. You're going to miss with those guns, because it's not about you being the Master Chief who isn't afraid of anything. You're playing a character, and if that character's bad at guns, it doesn't matter how good you are. You need to invest the time to make the character good at it. And I love the story of New Vegas. I love the various
New Vegas
different
has a cool story.
The various different pieces, the different choices you have, and the DLCs. Just the DLCs range from the hilarious and fun to, dude, the Divide is just genuinely emotionally it'll hit you. Old World Blues is a fucking amazing piece of storytelling. So if you go through and if you put in all the time to play New Vegas to the nth degree, then I think you'll get a lot about who I am in terms of, at the very least, in terms of what I like in video games.
Right on. As I said before, I had a couple honorable mentions that got booted off for one reason or another. I've always loved dating sims or visual novels with choice. But earlier this year I played Dream Daddy, and I was like, half these characters are me. So, literally, you can learn a lot about me. I learned a lot about myself by playing that game. Pokemon. If Final Fantasy VI wasn't a thing, I probably would have said Pokemon. And for both of us that we didn't already mention, I think Minecraft would be a decent choice.
Yeah, Minecraft has a lot of creative elements that I like.
Mm-hmm. We always keep threatening to, get another copy of the game and play together, but I don't know.
Life happens,
Yeah,
man.
life sure does fucking happen. All right, so that's part 2 of this 3-part trilogy.
That's a weird way to say that.
This is The Empire Strikes Back, so, God! Frozen in carbonite!
This is an audio medium. I don't think he thought this all the way through, because now he's stuck here until I say the thing. Everything's better when nerds talk about it.
I know.